Hello, this is Daniel here. Just a quick note before the show. This episode was recorded in June. At the time, our guest, Stephanie Boudjenah-Mazoyer, was the VP at Adidas in Portland, Oregon, in their headquarters for North America. Some of the context of this episode has actually changed since then, as she's just been announced as the new VP for EMEA for UGG, which is a brand part of the Deckers Group. But this is an episode that, as you'll see and hear, transcends immediacy as we spoke about topics that are at the heart of our career. Moving internationally, work-life balance, leadership, and the influence of sports. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the FMCG, guys. I'm your host, Efren Rosario, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Daniel. Daniel, good to see you as always. How are you?
Very good, very good. Good to see you too, Efrain. Where are you today?
Today, I am in just outside of Paris, actually on a beautiful sunny day. So I'm counting my blessings.
Excellent. So I know that you moved to Paris. How many years ago did you move to Paris?
It will be 7 years this summer, this July.
Okay. So I know that you moved to Paris from the US. How was it for you and your family to be an expat, to move continents?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, Daniel, I think one thing is that I had working for me is that I grew up as an expat. So this wasn't my first rodeo, as we like to say in the US, but I tell you that it varies sometimes between feeling incredibly brave at times to feeling incredibly crazy for having done it. And I think, like most things, the answer is somewhere in between. But nevertheless, it's been an amazing ride, and I'm thankful and blessed that we did it and that we're still on this ride.
Yeah, it's something that in part, I've had short stints abroad, but it's something that has always been on my agenda. But for some reason, I've always ended up staying in Barcelona. But on the flip side of that, we have our guest today. We have the pleasure today to introduce Stephanie Boudjenah-Mazoyer, who's joining us from Portland, Oregon. She's currently the VP of Concept to Consumer at Adidas, company with which she's lived in 4 countries and worked across different functions. And she also, you'll learn more, has a very interesting background in sports and highly competitive sports. So bringing her, I'm keen to understand from her perspective what it means to relocate internationally, also as a family, and how it's shaped her as a leader to get out of the comfort zone, to continuously get out of that comfort zone, both from a functional standpoint and location standpoint, how that's affected her leadership style. Hi, Steph. Thanks for joining us. How are you today? How are things in Portland?
Hi, Daniel. Yeah, very good. Everything's good. The sun is shining. So it's a great day.
Hey, Efrain.
Oh, hey, Daniel. How are you? Steph, thanks for joining us. And as we were talking before we started recording, it sounds like you and I probably have similar weather patterns as opposed to our friend. Closer to warmer climates than the two of us.
Absolutely. Although the summer made an appearance here in Portland, so I feel lucky today.
Great.
Okay. Well, fingers crossed that it makes its way over to me as well here in Europe.
Exactly. I'll send you some sunshine.
All right.
Yeah. Well, actually, Efrain and I will be together next week. By the time this episode goes live, we will have done it already, but we will have been in Shop Talk in London, meeting for the second time. So excited to meet you again, Efrain, in person.
Yeah, likewise. It's hard to believe that it's almost summer and that Shop Talk Europe will be making its initial run here in Europe.
Since this is going to air after Shop Talk, maybe I should already say it was great meeting you at Shop Talk, Efrain.
No,
anyway,
it's quite all right.
So Steph, so that the audience gets even more acquainted with you, I'm sure they'll have done a bit of research beforehand. Can you tell the audience a little bit, and you asked as well a bit about yourself, your background, and what you're doing now at Adidas in Portland?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently a vice president of concept to consumer, which is kind of heading, the merchandising function, if you like, and the market merchandising for the US market. So I've been in the US for almost 3 years now. And before that, I've been, in the sport industry for 18 plus years overall, mostly with Adidas. And I traveled around a little bit. So I started in global headquarters. I moved to the UK. I went back to the European headquarters, which is also in Germany. And then I came to the US. So I traveled around, and I have a pretty all-rounded expertise going from merchandising, sales, brand activation, and go-to-market roles. And something I'm super passionate about is leading and developing talent along the way as well.
Mm-hmm. So, Steph, it's interesting to hear, like you said, that you've been able to touch so many different functions in your time at Adidas. Can you tell us a little bit more in terms of, like, what drew you into I guess, sports marketing or marketing at a sports apparel company in the first place? Because I imagine that, I'm just curious to understand how did you land and at such a prime spot?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was, let's say, younger, or when I started looking for jobs, I had two passions when I was studying. I wanted to work in fashion and luxury or in sport. And initially, I went through the luxury route. So I did all my internship, all the job I got through all those big brands, Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, and so forth. And unfortunately, the sad September 11th happened, and the industry went a little bit on a halt at that moment. And it was quite hard to find some jobs. And so I looked into the sport route as well, which was my other passion. I'm an athlete at heart. I did a lot of sport at competition level when I was young. So that's how I decided to apply for Adidas. Yeah.
And what's amazing, like there's that you always hear about that in terms of, like, being able to combine your passion and your professional aptitude. Yes. It sounds like, because Adidas has been a great place for you to be able to find exactly that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think, I was always like, in sports. When I was young, I was always involved in sport. I played tennis. I did track and field in the early years. And then a friend told me, I should try and join her basketball team. Like, we were 11 years old, and then basketball became kind of my sport. Like, for 20 years, I competed at like regional level in France, and also at national level. When I went to the UK, I was in a national league there. And then, got older, started having kids, having busy schedule for jobs. So it was quite hard to fit this around a national level schedule as well, where we would travel every weekend for games. So I decided to stop when I was 30 years old, and running became my new sport. So I started getting into quite a lot. And I would say overall, I don't know, I feel there's a lot of similarities between sport and business, and like, team sport and work in a way is kind of the same thing. Like, working as a team is kind of a sport. And so, that's what's amazing. And that's what I love about working at Adidas. I actually use a lot of sports analogy. There's a lot of former athletes in the organization, and a lot of similarities, and it builds quite a strong character to be successful in business too.
Yeah. Is there any like particular situation where you think that the sports background, and I think, well, maybe you can tell us a bit exactly to what level you got to competitively, has impacted your career at any key points?
Yeah, like I have some fun stories, actually. It even started when I was much younger. We got to this track and field event, and with my school, and my school arrived late. And so the girls' race had happened already, and they let me race with the boys. And so obviously the girls' race had happened. The one girl won the race. For her, she was the champion of the race. And then I competed with the boy, and I arrived quite highly ranked within the boy, and I ended up doing the best time of the time. So I ended up winning the competition for the girls. So that was actually quite upsetting for that poor lady who hadn't seen me, because she was like, where is she coming from, this one? But, I think it built my confidence over time that, if you believe in yourself and, you're not afraid, you can go for it, even if it's like maybe in, uncomfortable environment like this one, for example, racing with the boys when, I was meant to race with the girls. And then playing team sports has always been, helping me because, it built my competitive character for sure. So, always want to win. But what I like about team sport in particular is I always want to win, but as a team, and you win as a team and you lose as a team. And, you're here for one another, you support one another. And that's something I strive for. So that's something I really value. And it's always been values that stuck to me in business as well. And as a people leader, like, the team aspect and the group. So
yeah, and as somebody who's a big sports fan, I can certainly relate to, like you said, just in terms of the amounts of times that sports are referenced with regards to how those life lessons, if you will, that we learn, whether we do it, recreationally, like some of us, or like professional or semi-professional, like you did. Those things are applicable, like you said, in a business setting as well. I mean, I think you don't have to look any further than just seeing the number of times that some sort of sports adage is being referenced in regards to, like, taking it one game at a time, or it's, it's about, like you said, we win as a team, we lose a team, right?
Exactly.
I mean, those things are just, you can't count the number of times that business leaders reference those kinds of things. So
exactly.
That's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, it's like, you win we're here to win not just the one game, but the championship. So, It's like you fight for the long run. When you talk about business as well, it's like not necessarily short-term gains, but, how you're going to make long-term growth and stuff like that. So 100%. I think it also helps you build resilience. Like I had quite a few injuries, obviously, throughout my time, and some big ones like ACL, knee surgeries, and, it builds resilience. You have to recover. It forces you to stop, even if you don't want to, you don't have a choice, and it forces you to train back and get back, in shape to actually carry on competing. And that kind of shapes your resilience as well towards adversity. And, I think the last 2 years in particular, our resilience has been tested from, all the COVID challenges. So, the sport resilience is definitely helping here too.
Absolutely. And just one other follow-up question, which is that, as we said, I think in general business, that connection to sport is pretty prevalent. I'm just curious, is that heightened at a place like Adidas, where obviously sport is at the core of what you do? I mean, can you give us a little bit of insight into, how that works, being a former athlete, working at a leading sports company like Adidas, and, running a business?
For sure, it's heightened, because I would say overall it's definitely competitive, not necessarily negatively, but, a lot of employees come from sport background, have competed at a high level. So everybody's definitely got this, winning mindset and competitive mindset for sure. But what's also heightened is passion for sport. So everybody is passionate about sport, follows sport, whether it's a sport they've done or not. We always start meeting talking about some of the sport results or what's going on in sports. So there's a real passion, and there's also a strong competitive mindset, and but will to win, but also, this resilience behind it to work hard to actually earn the victory. And you can definitely feel it, because there's a lot of profiles like this in the organization.
And I know that in your career, like going back to your career, you've moved a lot internationally, and with family. I know that you're originally from France. Later, you moved to Germany, if I'm not wrong. And then you moved now a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Was it? To Portland, Oregon. 3
years almost now.
3 years almost, which interesting 3 years in the US also, with everything that's happened. I think, we've had, what have we had? COVID. We had Black Lives Matter, which was a big topic even in business in the US, or especially impacting business in the US. And and then you had returned to normal, no? I know a lot of other things that have happened as well. I wanted to invite you to reflect on moving internationally, because of course, me as a headhunter, I speak with a lot of candidates that are very hesitant to moving internationally. Mm-hmm. So, and I know that you've moved also with family, right? I think you have, 2 kids?
2 boys, yeah.
Two
and
boys.
I moved with both of them, yeah.
And a partner as well?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I can tell you a little bit about this journey. So it's interesting because I come from a family that has been very local. So I was born and raised in Normandy all the way till I was 18, went to school, like very stable, didn't go anywhere, went on holiday, but nothing specific. The only thing is when I turned 10, I had the opportunity to do an exchange with the family in the UK. So I was sent 6 months to live in the UK. And then they sent their daughters to live with me and my family for 6 months. Mm. And I think that started giving me the bug for enjoying living abroad and discovering new culture. It definitely started opening my mind, right? And I started obviously learning, English and German at school. And at uni, I had the opportunity to study in Australia. And I decided to go for it. So it's funny because I was already in a relationship with my now husband, but I decided, hey, I have this opportunity. It's a once in a lifetime. And I went for it.
Wow. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
But it was fantastic because, I discovered again another culture, a country that, even on a holiday, it's hard to get to because it's so far away. So it was really a fantastic opportunity. And then obviously, I then got to join adidas in Germany for my first job. And there, you work with over 40 different nationalities, made friends from all over the world. So you're in Germany, but it's like the United Nation, it's people from every culture. It's a kind of a standard that most people speak 2 to 3 fluent languages. So it opens up your mind. And
one question, sorry.
Yeah.
How did having studied in France, how come you got hired by Adidas in Germany?
So it was the headquarters. And I got hired as a junior product manager, and I attracted them is all the great internship I had done in the luxury and fashion industry. So I definitely had this understanding of fashion, of trends, and the role was a global role. So they needed people from, different perspective to create globally relevant product and ranges, right? Because if you just hire one type of profile or functionality with one sense of style, or it becomes very unidimensional, and then it can be tricky to create a globally relevant product offer.
Well, and I have to imagine, I think this holds true for a lot of companies, is that you think about the luxury apparel sector, and there are some great brands there. So obviously they're doing something right, a lot right, actually, with regards to branding and just general marketing strategies. So I can see how that would be very attractive. That kind of experience would be very attractive at a company like Adidas. So it makes a lot of sense in terms of being able to go from that one sector to the other.
Yeah, and I think what also appealed them is I could already speak, I was pretty good in German because I learned at school, and I was fluent in English, French. So again, when you communicate with the different markets, it's all an advantage, right? If you can speak their language. So. Oh,
absolutely. And I think, if nothing else, in terms of building that rapport and like camaraderie with people, even outside of let's say the business meeting, but in terms of even more like a social setting before and after those meetings, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I find it quite exciting to move out of my comfort zone. It's kind of thrilling in a way. So it's like a mixture of excitement and anxiety, right? Because you don't know, what you leave and you don't know what you're going to get. And I don't know, it gives me a sense of adventure. So you go on an adventure, you never exactly know for sure, right? It could, there could be some good things, some bad things, But this excitement it provides me has always driven me. And so far it's worked out, right? I mean, I think wherever you live, there's upsides and there's downsides, but I've always felt the upsides were definitely, overplaying the downsides. And so I've never regretted a move. And moving with family, I believe that if the core of the family is solid and you feel positive about the move, children are very resilient. So, yes, they might go through an adaptation phase, especially as they get older. But they adapt pretty quickly. Yeah. And if the parents are happy, usually it works out.
Well, I think you nailed it right there, which is that I think that one, our children are typically more resilient than I think one we give them credit for, and two, than their parents. As somebody who's done an international move with a young child, I can attest to that. But I think secondly, in terms of, like you said, the moving internationally like that, as much as you have, would you agree that it's built the skill of being able to adapt for you? And totally. Has that you've been able to take that and parlay that into business as well?
Exactly. I would say that's one of my biggest strengths is adaptability. And, especially with the last few years, we've had constant change, the unexpected, and, being open to that is definitely something that doesn't scare me, because you learn to adapt yourself to new environments. And, it builds this resilience again that I know it's been an overused term, but it really is true, because, moving requires an effort. But it's a very rewarding effort, I would say. So.
Yeah. And I would say it's also a mindset as well, right? Is that I think, you have to one of these moves, whether it be a geographic move, like you've described, but also even like a professional move with the right mindset, as you were saying with the family as well.
Yeah. And I also believe it builds your empathy. I mean, I believe in empathy in leadership. And actually, I think it builds this for you, because the more you travel, the more you open up yourself to different cultures, different ways of working, different ways of thinking. And it makes you, a lot more tolerant. You just understand different perspectives more. And so if you evolve and like working in an international environment, which is what I like and I thrive in, it makes you a better leader, actually, by having moved and lived in different places.
Yeah, but a lot of people that I speak with, and I think that where they have the challenge is for example, in your case, you moved very early, but it is true that then you spent a number of years, I think, in Germany, right? I don't know how long. Yeah. How long did you spend in headquarters?
So I started in headquarters. I stayed 3 years, just under 3 years. Then I moved to the UK, where I stayed 10 years.
Wow.
Then I moved back to Germany, where I stayed 6 years. And then I moved to the US for 3 years now.
Okay. So a lot of people, they don't really get the opportunity to move until, or maybe they do get the opportunity to move and they've moved before, but when they really find it challenging to move is when they're settled, they have a partner, they buy a house, they have kids, then they find it very hard to move because they just see it as a massive disruption. What do you tell? Because I'm sure that you've encountered people that you've wanted to promote internally and they kind of have that barrier. How do you, what's your point of view with these people?
Yeah. So, I mean, first, I would say there has to be a certain willingness inside them. I mean, if they don't want to move at all, then obviously I would not, some people want roots and they want to be settled, and I respect that. So obviously, that's one side. But people who are hesitating, so they're attracted by the idea of moving, but it makes them feel nervous because it is a disruptive move. I would try and tell them all the upsides. So yes, you can see the negative aspects, which is the disruption, the pain of having to move, to build new relationship, to lose your support network. If you have parents nearby to help with your children, I mean, you lose all that. So you have that aspect, which, is a reality, and you have to, I don't want to sugarcoat that, but the upside are wonderful. Your children get to meet different cultures, they'll learn a different language. Children pick up on languages in no time, so your children become bilingual, and you have the upside, you can discover a new country. I mean, I discovered the North Pacific Northwest, which is beautiful. And, I got to do road trips that, I would have never had a chance to do with like 2 weeks holidays. There's amazing upside, and you make amazing friends. Like everywhere I lived, I have made long life friends now that, live all over the globe, and I can still contact now today. And it's also a good professional network as well. So
yeah,
a combination of friendship and network. And you build those strong friends even more because you do not have the family nearby as a default. And it makes you build really deeper relationship because other people will be in your case, and also, expats with no support network. And that's what becomes your support network, actually. And it's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like, I think as somebody, again, who can relate, I completely agree. I think that the tribe of friends that you build when you're put into those situations where you're outside of, let's say, your home culture, and you have to, in essence, kind of adapt and be resilient. There's something about that experience that brings you closer together in terms of, like you said, you make these lifelong friends along the way.
Yeah.
So to that point, have you, you mentioned that you have a passion for people development and for mentoring people in your organization. So in terms of people at Adidas, for example, that might be interested in regards to like saying, hey, I want to explore international opportunities, or I want to, in essence, move around, and, who say they're open to those things. What do you find to be, in essence, kind of like what would your guidance be in regards to your approach to mentoring those individuals?
Yeah, so I mean, what I do is I support them as much as I can in the sense that first I'll give them access to my network wherever I can. And thanks to all my move, I've now got a very broad network. Like I probably think I know at least a couple good people that are close to my network in every country in the world in Adidas. So that already helps. And I always love to, make people I mentor and I support, I love to get them to benefit from this network and introduce them. And then I would definitely encourage them by telling them my journey. And also not sugarcoat it. So I always try and give the true version of the truth, right? I don't try and just paint a beautiful picture and say everything's easy and it's wonderful. I try and really share the reality as well in terms of, the disruption it brings and the effort it takes. I mean, things like, having to learn the education system, which is different in every country, even within Europe, the health system, the pension system. I mean, administration, having to learn, to pass your driving test when you go to the US again. So there's definitely things, it's like hard work, but, I'm showing all the upsides as well, and all the cultural aspects that you get to discover, which, I always feel, being a foreigner somewhere, I always feel like a tourist a little bit, right? So I look at things through the eye of a tourist, which is fantastic. You discover new cultural moments, new customs, which is so enriching, right? And what I always tell people is, reminding them that it's not prison, so they can go for it. And if things don't work, or they turn out not to be happy at all, they can always come back home. It's not a point of no return. I always try and remind people that you can always go back home as an option. So it's always trying to remember, do I really have a lot to lose, or do I have more to gain by doing this? Take a step, and in worst case, I come back home and then I look for another job home and I'll settle back home, and at least I will know what it felt like. But I think in most cases, people will be like, I've rarely met people that have had really bad experiences.
Yeah, same. And like after like this background in sports, like how you've grown up in Adidas, where actually, I know that you've done a lot of different functions. I think that you've done product, you've done sales, marketing as well, I think.
Yeah, yes, I'm doing trade marketing currently.
Trade marketing
as
now.
one of the functions.
merchandising. Together with this international experience that you've had, what kind of leader have you become with these experiences?
I would say I'm definitely, in the US, we say a servant leader. So I'm all about the people, the team. We're one team, and I've definitely developed a passion for trying to get the best out of people, developing people, watching them grow, succeed. That's one of the things that's super rewarding for me. The other thing I would say is I believe in really strong values. So like honesty, trust, openness, working hard. So I'm definitely hard on myself. So I expect people to be hard on themselves, but to work hard and do their best. And again, I guess that comes back from the sport, but having that will to leave, that will to want to win and be successful. I'm very transparent as well, and I like fun, and I have the team spirit, right? It's all about togetherness. And another thing that I developed, I would say, throughout my few years now in the US, having experienced the social movements and a lot of the challenges with Black Lives Matters, with the COVID work from home and everybody having their kids and work, combination of all this. And, even recently, all the very tragic shootings that have happened in schools and so forth, I've definitely created psychological safety in the team. So for me, that's something I value a lot, is to build that psychological safety where people feel they can speak up, they can open up, they can put their hands up if they feel something's not right and come forward. It's something that matters to me a lot, and I really strive to create in the environment.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to what you mentioned earlier, which is around being an empathetic leader as well, right? Which is that, those of us, who've been in industry for quite a while, we've been in those positions before, so we can empathize with people who are at, more junior positions, because we've been there, we've lived it, we know it, right? So I think it's just, we have to remind ourselves of that, and we have to draw on that empathy to really, like you said, create that safety for people. I think more so now than ever, given the last 2-3 years of everything that everybody's been through. I know that, Daniel, you and I have spoken with one of our other guests with regards to having to manage people in this Zoom era, and being able to, how do you that psychological safety in a virtual setting like we're having right now, right, where you're not able to interact with people on a regular basis in the same physical environment. How have you found that, particularly to the point Daniel made earlier, which is that you've basically spent your time in the US with adidas, most of it under the cloud of the COVID pandemic. So how has that been for you?
It's definitely been tough, because I'm a people person. I think you got that now, and I'm very social, and I get the energy from being with people. So it was definitely, I onboarded in this role, and bam, COVID hit, and I had to suddenly lead a very large team in a new environment, a new culture. I was, coming new here in the country, and I had to navigate through all the social things that were going on around us, and I had to engage the team on it. So it's definitely been a steep learning curve, I would say. But somehow, I didn't give up. There's definitely been moments I was like, what have I done? I brought my whole family here, and, here we go. Obviously I didn't know, but I had a huge guilt on my shoulder. But somehow we navigated through it, and it made us stronger. And, I almost feel like I can face anything with what we've been through the last few years. And the moment it happened for me in my career with getting into a VP role, leading a team of 90 people, where I came from a team of leading 10 people, doing this virtually in a new country, which was going through lots of things, socially, has been, a huge challenge, but that I feel I've overcome, and we're now back in person, and it's worked out. So it's definitely stronger and even more resilient than before, I would say.
Yeah, no,
because
absolutely.
I didn't give up. Yeah, and again, maybe coming from the athlete person, but I don't like giving up, and I didn't give up. I was like, no, I'm not going to give up. Like, some people did leave and go back home, and I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to get through this.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking, Steph, that I think it's probably at least I feel like that's one of these situations where you go through it and you're like, wow, how the hell did I go through that? But you also think, with once, I think I've had enough. Like, if it happens again, I'll do it again. But goodness, it was a rough ride. Steph, I think that as a listener to the podcast, you know that we ask all our guests the same question at the end, which is, if you were to speak with your younger self at the beginning of the career, that young girl, because you must have been very young, that got the job at Adidas, as a global product manager, moving from France, what type of advice would you give that younger self?
Yeah, so I think the first advice I'd say is don't be afraid, and especially don't be afraid of senior exec leaders. Like, I think herself was really, looking at the hierarchy and like all these people up there, they're unattainable. But at the end of the day, they are also real people and human beings. So, they're not, there's no reason to be scared about them. I would say create your network early, maintain it and expand it. I think the network is really important as you navigate through your career, when you look to change job, etc. So really important to build a network and maintaining it by staying in touch on a regular basis. I would say definitely important. Finding good mentors along the way as well. I would say personally, I feel I've not had many mentors, and I wish I had more mentors that I could rely on today. So I would definitely recommend people, if they find someone that they feel is a good fit and they really value and aspire to carry on that relationship, whether they stay in the same organization or not. And I would also say, don't worry. Like, if you want to reach out to senior exec to get advice and so forth, don't be afraid. Like, don't think you will bother them and that they don't have time. Because I have a lot of younger people now that reach out and they say, oh, I don't want to bother you. I know you're busy, but actually I'm always happy to help them. And it's flattering and it's something I enjoy doing. So I'm glad when they come and out, and I'm like, no, you never bother me. Like, it's a pleasure actually. So, and the other thing is, if you don't ask, you don't get. So it's important that you go for it, because I would say, it's not very often that people bring you things on a silver platter. At least for me, I always had to fight for what I got. I was never given a job like this. I had to interview, I had to go for it. And I would say, don't ask to be noticed, just go forward and, and put your hand up. And in the end, I would say, go for the things you want to get, take the leap, don't be afraid. And, I would say timing is never right. So don't wait for the perfect timing. I've often said this to young women in particular who want to start a family, but they have a career opportunity. And I'm like, at the end, the timing is never perfect. So go for everything, go for it, and you'll see things will work out, because otherwise you'll end up waiting forever for the perfect timing. Put yourself out there and be kind, look around. Like, be aware of your surrounding, I would say, is also very important. Like, and stay true to yourself and believe in this. That's something I've learned along the way. And the older I get and the more I lead, the more I realize, I have to be myself, and that's how I'm a better leader. And just be who you are, because that's also going to be leading you to your happiness the best.
This was Stephanie Boudjenah-Mazoyer, VP of Concept to Consumer North America at Adidas. This was a very inspirational conversation, Efrain. What are your main takeaways? What have you learned?
Well, I think one is that I may have found a kindred spirit from an expat standpoint in Steph. So I really enjoyed just listening to her share some of those lessons that she's learned through her various expat experiences, but also in terms of just her leadership experiences as well, both at Adidas as well as other places throughout her career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that one thing that I think is really powerful for me, especially speaking with candidates who are very afraid basically to relocate, the fact that she mentioned that it's actually like, it's a risk, of course, but it's actually quite a controlled risk because you can always go back. So getting out of the comfort zone doesn't necessarily mean putting everything on the line.
Absolutely. And I think, to paraphrase what Steph said, the timing is never going to be perfect. So you have to just go for it. Right. Yeah. So, but I think that safety net of, like you said, and she mentioned it as well, is that you can always move back. Right. I mean, worst case, you can always, if needed, either move back with your current company, or if you need to look elsewhere, you can always find somewhere else to go back to in your home country if needed. So I do think that it does require, obviously, quite a lot of bravery from the individual, because it is outside your comfort zone, right? You really are leaving a lot of, well, let's call it the support infrastructure that you may have in place, and have to, in essence, reestablish those things in new surroundings. And I think, as somebody who's lived that, both as a child, but also now as an adult with a family, particularly as an adult, it's hard. It's harder as an adult to make new friends. So I think it does require that bravery, but at the same time, it's incredibly fulfilling, right? In terms of putting yourself out there and building that resilience in regards to saying, you can do it and you can overcome this, and you come out of it, with lifelong friends that you'll have forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks to our listeners for joining us once again for this conversation. Remember, you can always contact us for suggestions and feedback. We also, like Stephanie, have a very open door policy. And remember also to follow us on LinkedIn if you're not yet. And also a shout out and a thank you to our partners in the US, the CPG guys, who are delivering bi-weekly great content, especially very omni-channel US focused. So if you want to learn about that side of the world, you definitely have to tune into them. Goodbye and to the next episode. Cheers.